I find it's such a hard idea to beat into your head that I need to, when I'm communicating something, I need to think about the lens and like, I guess the camera analogy. I need to think about the settings on my camera of how I'm interpreting it. And then I need to look at the settings on their camera. It's not just the lens, it's the color balance, it's the aperture, it's the, all those different settings. And to have to remember all of this is, and to decipher what other, communication styles and personalities of all the different individuals, it's a huge cognitive load.
Oh my gosh. And that's a really great metaphor too. Because on top of that, there's what are the environmental factors that are impacting how you're showing up today? Do you have something difficult happening in your life? Is it raining over there, right? Do you have something else that is on your mind that is impacting you from showing up the right way? And you may or may not feel comfortable with that, but folks' scenarios and what's happening in their life also impacts the way that they communicate with you and everybody else or interpret a message, right? Like when I'm in a bad mood, I interpret messages negatively, even if they're positive, right? Because it's like you're wearing a cloak of sadness and everything penetrates through that cloak, and and it's like it's harder for you to be like, yeah, no, I get it, I'm feeling really sad today, but I'm so happy for you, or yes, I can get on that project. Or you might be really excited about something, but because of what's going on in your life, you can't show excitement, and now you have to spend the next 3 weeks apologizing to that person for not being enthusiastic enough about their idea because you were going through something completely separate. So it's like communication is just this iceberg, and we see the very tip of the iceberg, however jagged it is, and we don't know what is sitting underneath it. And unfortunately, by no fault, most people don't care. Like you're not going into a conversation thinking, I want to show up as a safe person in this conversation. I want to communicate in a way that can kind of break down your walls and your barriers. I want to understand the context of how you're walking in the room. Because if we thought about that before every single conversation, we'd never have the conversation. So we just barrel through.
Totally. And I think it makes it even more complex when you have to think about, to go back to the camera scenario, if I'm an organization level up, or if I'm a level up in the org chart, and then all of it changes if we're communicating in the same style, or we're on the same level, or I'm below or I'm above, it changes things, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Your role is massive in how thumbs up.
Thanks, Sim.
Your role is massive in determining how you not only act, but how you are interpreted. One of the things I talk about a lot is, have you heard of the Stanford Prison Experiment in the 70s?
I think so. Yeah.
This is like a wild, we'll call it cautionary tale of how role impacts your persona and how you show up. So basically, Stanford wanted to do a prison study where in the basements of the university, they built out an effective prison. And they got volunteers to join this experiment. And the volunteers were anywhere from homemakers to lawyers to doctors to accountants to retail work. I mean, like a massive mix of people and all these different job functions. And they got everybody together and they split them in half completely randomly. And they said, okay, this half, you're the prisoners, and this half, you're the prison guards. And we are going to enact a 1 to 2 day role play scenario where you are now, for all intents and purposes, a prison guard, and you are a prisoner. You are a criminal. If you want to just read a wild study of human behavior and how your role impacts your sense of worth, look into this study because it went haywire. It got so bad where people existed. Like, you have a lawyer making $500,000 a year that was assigned a prisoner that is sitting in a jail cell sobbing and trying to figure out like how to escape the jail that they're not actually in because the role became so immersive that they couldn't separate themselves from the role, right? So they had, a guy with no job as a prison guard basically battering a lawyer who was pretending to be a prisoner, and they were going along with it. I mean, so they had to shut this thing down because there were severe psychological effects that actually happened. So look into it. But what does that tell us? That tells us that our role at work plays into our self-worth and our importance so much that we can lose ourselves in it. And then when we try to communicate, that also then plays a factor. We start to think bad leaders start to think that they have the ability to give people feedback on their personality, feedback on their feelings instead of what to do with their feelings. Sometimes leaders think they have a right to show tough love. I'm sorry, you're not their parent. You don't have the ability to give them feedback on feeling something. You can coach on behavior, but not feelings, right? So you can't coach somebody on their identity just because you're their boss. So that overstepping does start to happen, and trust can get diminished. It's wild to look into the data behind this.
I think there was a documentary about the prison experiment as well, wasn't there?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of really kind of messed up psychological experiments. There's one about learned helplessness that also kind of plays into communication that just, I geek out over these things. I've been studying sort of the psychology of how people communicate at work for the better half of 10 years. And these experiments really show human behavior and how it actually hasn't evolved that much since then. Like, we are who we are. And so awareness and high EQ is so paramount.